We're all in business for a reason. The problem that so many small business owners have is they go in 10 million different directions, not really sure which way to go. Listen as your team of experts, Jennifer Glass and Patricia Reszetylo, go through what you need in your business to really make it stand out and benefit you. Because it's the bottom line that matters. Hello and welcome to another episode of It's the Bottom Line That Matters podcast, where we are dedicated to your success. If this is the first time you're checking us out, thank you so much for listening. If you are a returning listener, thank you again so much for continuing to go down this crazy journey with Patricia and me. On our show today, we are going to be talking again about the working capital gap. And the point of today's episode is going to be, how do you really come up with, first of all, ironclad payment policies, as well as how do you automate your payment acceptance processes? Now, we spoke last time a lot about the net 30, net 60 kind of ideas and starting to touch on some of these topics, but we're going to go a little bit more in depth today. It's not going to be a tremendously long episode, I don't believe, in terms of what we are going to be covering today, but it is important for you to at least think about, how do you start at least automating some of your particular processes around payments and having that ironclad payment policy. So Patricia, let me ask you, because last time we did talk about that, having an agreement, knowing what your costs are going to be and things along those lines before you even start working. So if we've got this ironclad agreement, tell us more, like, what would you do in that ironclad agreement, knowing what your costs are going to be and how you would enforce the payments from your clients for the work that may be coming in?
Yeah, I have no idea on any of those points. Um, I mean, ironclad is ironclad as far as long as the customer makes a payment. At some point, they can simply say, "Well, I'm not paying you," and what do you do to force that? You can't. I don't know that you can force them to do the payment, other than um, use some of the negotiation skills that you may have learned and call them and get them to make at least a partial payment or
Don't
something along those
forget the
lines.
legal rights that you, as the business owner, have because they
Right.
signed a contract with you.
Right, right. There is that. I would be predisposed to taking a human approach,
Human approach is
humane
always a good
approach
thing.
to it initially, because they are human and you don't know what happened in the back room of their life, right? And it's just giving them an opportunity to have a conversation with you instead of, ring, ring. Hello, who is this? This is Patricia, and you owe me X amount of money. Pay now, or I'm taking you to court. That's, I mean, yes, court is eventually an eventuality if nothing happens, but it's one of those things that both sides really hope doesn't happen. It's expensive, it's time consuming. So,
No doubt whatsoever on that front. And I'm just going to raise again that client that I mentioned last time,
yeah,
the 35, 40,000 SKU website that we needed to deal with. And this particular client, there was an agreement that we signed, right? The client signed it, gave us his credit card to do the billing, and said he's
yeah,
not covering the remaining balances. And when the work was done, and he just kept on changing his mind, and our agreement, we basically, that was the problem, and I will own up to it, my developer and I, we allowed project creep to dramatically explode.
yeah,
Let's just call a
yeah,
spade, because
yeah,
he didn't like the design after he approved it. He wanted to change the design. So we allowed him to change the design, and he changed the design again, and he changed the design again, and he changed the design again. And ultimately, he got to a certain point where I think we went through 10, 12 different iterations of what his
Oh,
site looked like, but we never charged and we never quoted additional design changes. And so
yeah,
when he said, I'm not paying because I don't like the way that it looks, you approved the way that it looked originally. You
yeah,
approved after each time, and then you came back and said, but I don't like it now because someone else told you they didn't like it. If
yeah,
you are
yeah,
signing off, you still owe that money. And so
right.
at a certain point, you reach out, you send reminders, you send late fees, you send all sorts of other things. And again, like I said, for us, we needed to even go to collections against them before we even were talking about court. But we had that issue, and that
Right.
ironclad payment policy was still there in the sense that, all right, you owe the money, but are you going to really do it?
Yeah, 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 yeah. So in that kind, and I've had not to that scale, but I've had scope creep that happened, and I was unhappy, and the client was unhappy, and we did finally come to an understanding. But a lot of heartache could have been uh, avoided if, when I set up the original agreement, that I had actually done the full scope as part of the agreement, um, and then not allowed the scope creep. The scope creep in that project was purely on me, totally 100% on me. He would have been fine with the original, this, the original scope. Um, and I could have just moved on. Wow, what a concept. But no, Patricia has to make more and more and more.
What a
And then she has
concept.
to say,
Yes.
oh, but we can't just do this. We have to do all this extraneous stuff too. Yeah. So understanding the industry that you're in and what scope creep might look like, and set up some parameters for it. So let's say that we're a web designer, or a web builder, well, however we want to call them, you know, you have to build a little bit of creep in there, so you can say, we'll do 3 designs, and then you get to pick which one you want, and then that's it. You have to contain the scope a little bit, and I'll bet dollars to donuts that you and your web person have a much better contract now based on that.
Right. And it's
Right.
important when you think about what it is exactly that you're doing there to make sure from a project scope creep that everything is working the way that it's supposed to. But going back though to the automating the payment process, let's kind of
Yeah.
bring it back there. So I mentioned last time about having ACH, credit cards, things along those lines as one of the benefits that you have. Now, my billing system automatically sends out invoices whenever they're due, right? It's really important that that goes out when it's actually due, and it doesn't give 30 days even for return payment. It is a 10-day typically return payment unless I manually change the agreed upon timing.
Yeah.
But when you do that, the other thing is also if there is an active subscription on the client's part, once the invoice is done, it automatically then brings in the ultimate uh, payment by hitting their card or forcing an ACH or anything along those lines in terms of getting the payment in for what is actually there. Now, I have several clients that automatically are on my ACH system that on a certain day of every month, it automatically goes in, pulls the funds, and brings it over. So, as an example, at the end of the month, I automatically go into certain clients in my web hosting business and we debit the funds. It's a great way to be able to do that because I don't have to even worry about the funds not being there. Now, the only time I do is when it bounces. But other than that, and this one client in particular, I've had 3 instances where it bounced. And my bank got really upset with me because, you know, you're
Yeah.
violating our natural rules, not on purpose. Let's just understand that. Um, but when it comes down to how we're actually looking at what we're doing, it does become important in that regard to then really understand, all right, I got A, B, and C done, and we can move on. So, Patricia, let me just ask you as we wrap up our conversation, though, because we kind of had a lot of different rabbit holes here. If you were just going to sum it up for our listeners, how would you sum it up for them?
I would suggest that you really look at your contract, um, and test it with some edge cases. What would happen if, you know, um, and the edge cases for your industry better than I do. What would happen if, and either write something to help contain that, um, have your attorney approve it, whatever, blah, blah, blah. Uh, right. But have something in there to preemptively, um, take care of some of those things that can happen. Because unless this is your first day in business, stuff is going to happen.
And you raise an important point just in terms of having an attorney be involved in drafting your agreements anyway. And here's
Yeah.
one of the biggest issues that you do want to be aware of and think about in what you're doing. And that is way too many people go online, they find an agreement, and they say, oh, I like this agreement, I'm just going to use it. Or even worse, as in somebody, Patricia, that you and I know, this one person sends a proposal and has a piece at the end of the proposal saying, client agrees to make a payment of X dollars, and that's it. Doesn't have any terms, any kind of requirements to actually follow up with the payment, other than client agrees that they're going to make this payment, but what exactly is it? How is it broken out? What's
Yeah.
actually due? What happens if there's arguments or concerns, things along those lines? All of that not even there. And so if we don't pay attention to what we're really doing, we then start really getting hurt. And so from a attorney looking at your agreements, or certainly even better drafting them for your particular state, that is something that you need to be paying attention to as well.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Any
Absolutely.
final thoughts?
That's pretty much it for me.
Okay. So again, think about what you can do in terms of automating the process, making sure, again, like we said, your agreements are as ironclad as possible. Understand when, if you need to be going beyond just the one-on-one outreach to the client that owes money, whether it's to collections, to an attorney, to an arbitrator, whatever it may be. There's a lot of different options that are out there, certainly. Like Patricia was saying, that can be an option of last resort, but there are different times that you do need to actually pay attention on that. So think about how it can work for you, how you can be getting paid, because after all, that is what is going to ultimately benefit you in your business and keeping the relationship as good as possible. On that note, this has been another episode of It's the Bottom Line That Matters. And until next time, here is to your success. Thanks so much for listening to another amazing episode of It's the Bottom Line That Matters podcast. We're all about helping the small business community grow and reaching as many people as we can. And the algorithms on the podcast programs love reviews. So if you loved what you just heard, consider leaving us a review. And even if you don't, I'm sure you already did, but consider sharing our episodes and our podcast with your friends and colleagues. Sharing is caring, and here's to your success. Thanks so much, and have a wonderful day.
It's the bottom line that matters.